Не всім численним українським фестивалям вдалося цього літа відкритися. Але з приємністю повідомляємо, що український фестиваль в Монреалі відбудеться 10 вересня. І там в кіоску місцевого УНО буде автор і журналіст Віктор Малярек представляти свою нову книжку «Wheatshaft».
Дорогі глядачі, продовжуємо сьогоднішню програму і радо вітати в нашій студії багатонагородженого автора, журналіста Віктора Маларека. So Victor, welcome to our show. Thank you very much for your time in joining us here today. And I think we have a pretty neat book here that you just wrote, a mystery thriller like good for the times, Wheatshaft. To what extent would you call this book with the Ukrainian sounding and Ukrainian background journalist Matt Kozar? To what extent is that Viktor Malarek? And it's autobiographical, maybe.
Yeah, it's a younger, brasher Viktor Malarek, and it was a lot of fun, creating the character in his age, being about 30 years old. It's ironic because also in Orphanage 41, Petrenko, this reporter who was a little older and a little bit more brash and more in your face. So you see a reporter who is just getting his feet wet in trying to get into an investigation that leads all over the place, from Eritrea and over into Moscow and into Chicago and New York City and Washington and Arizona, all kinds of crazy things happening. And this reporter who just basically sat on the sidelines, always wanting to get the big story, suddenly trips on the story of his life, which almost cost him his life.
But at the same time, this is kind of a lesson for journalists today, and also for all of us as consumers, that there's a lot of information out there, but not necessarily all of it is true. And you're an example of the fact that you have to follow through on things, and you have to know who does follow through and who presents just casual or even fake info.
Yeah, you have to listen. One of the things I always tell young journalists, or any journalist, is when people are talking and doing things, listen, and watch. And when a lot of this happens to be a modern day famine, which is ironically happening right now in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, and Somalia. And here it is, I'm writing about it, but I was there in 1982, 83 for the Globe and Mail. So things that I saw, the kinds of corruption and unscrupulousness going on, is going to for sure happen here with the United Nations and all of the skullduggery that goes on with the movement of food aid around the world, and especially to refugees, and how little of it actually gets to refugees.
Well, also, we have Ukraine in the news, not because Ukraine did anything bad, but because of what Russia is doing. And Russia also features in your book, and I think one of the more interesting parts of the book, or let's say moments, is a minister of agriculture that just somehow really knows nothing.
Well, he says he knows nothing. When the reporter Matt Kozar starts to question him, and they try to use Matt Kozar's Ukrainian connection, his bloodline, his the fact that his family or his grandparents came from Ukraine, and Matt Kozar is not falling for it, but he also then starts to challenge the agriculture minister. You want to play games? I know how to ask questions. And he starts to challenge the minister about what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening with Crimea, what's happening in Syria. He really goes after him. And this really upsets the agriculture minister, who says, I'm in charge of food. Go and speak to the foreign minister, or, go and speak to the transportation minister. When he's right in the thick, right in the middle with his brother from Rostov-on-the-Don in a huge, huge scam involving hundreds of millions of dollars of international wheat aid coming from the United States and being siphoned off by the Russians, and the Russians sending absolute garbage to the refugees who are starving in Ethiopia.
As you mentioned before, and And I definitely felt it when reading the book, that you, in a sense, predicted or foresaw the trouble that we have in the Horn of Africa today with famine. And I would just like to read a little book when meeting with the head of Eritrean government. There's a quote here. It says, "That's when he told me the guy had died, killed when a grain sacks collapsed on him. Isn't that ironic? Food sent to save starving people kills a guy sent to save the starving people." How? I mean, it's 30 years, I think, since you were last out there. How did that whole situation, and you sort of mentioned it a little earlier, transform into the famine that we have in Eritrea and everywhere in those areas today?
If you challenge the people who are stealing the food and you're on the ground over there, the chances are you will be dealt with, because nobody wants to speak, nobody wants to say anything because of the dangers of the, basically terrorists and thieves and, the real low element that doesn't care about starving but cares about stealing the food. And when anybody challenges what's going on, the kind of food aid that comes and the kind of food aid that didn't get there, you can finally end up quite hurt or, in fact, dead. And in this case, this guy goes up to Matt Kozar at a refugee feeding center and just rakes them over the coals about how reporters are not really looking at what kind of food aid is being sent over. And he throws some of this wheat at him, which is just a chaff of wheat, which is the play on the title of the book, Wheatshaft. He ends up being killed. And when Matt Kozar is told that the guy is dead, he thinks, I can't believe this, that these officials are saying a sack of grain fell on this guy and he dies with the very food that he is there to try to save people's lives. So there were so many things that happened in 1982, 83 in the famine that I saw with death and destruction and the kinds of things that were going on, that I knew that it wouldn't matter what famine you had, if it was fiction or nonfiction, this stuff's going to go on all the time. Food aid is a multi-billion dollar industry. And the amount of skullduggery that goes on in that is unreal.
So, Victor, thank you very much for being with us. Дорогі глядачі, це розмова з паном Віктором Малареком. Скорше чи пізніше будуть we're going to have live presentations of the book with Victor, and I think Victor is very generously going to be donating the proceeds. Victor, maybe tell us who you intend to be the benefactor for with the profits of this book.
Well, I'm hoping to give the royalties to Nashi, which is in Saskatoon, which helps a orphanage with 20 young rescued girls there. I'm also going to help or donate to help us help, and hopefully the money will be directed to the families and to soldiers who've been wounded, or the families of soldiers who've been killed in the struggle against the Russian invasion. So that's important to me, and what I feel is the right thing to do.
Добре, то, дорогі глядачі, вважайте, ми будемо подавати точну інформацію, де і коли ті презентації наживо будуть з Віктором Малареком. А тим часом, пане Віктор, дуже дякуємо, що ви тут з нами були сьогодні.
Thank you.